and I'm also talking about individual level research, but here the outcome is going to be mortality. And this is demographic research, so we don't have any genetic information. We just have the information available in things like censuses and material like that. And so what I'm going to be talking about is the challenge of getting access to such data and how we have one particular solution in what we call the CenSoc project, which is linking census and social security data. And our way around this, so you just heard concerns about privacy. Our concerns around this, our way around this is to just ignore all private data and use only public data. So we can do anything we want with it, and researchers can do anything they want with it. We can talk, if we have time at the end, about some ways we try to subtly discourage bad behavior. Okay. And I unfortunately also have to leave. I have graduation at a little before 11 o'clock, so I'm going to try to get out of here quickly while they get robed and all that sort of thing. Okay, so here are two quotations to kind of motivate us. So there's something called the Human Mortality Database, which is life tables from all around the world. Great data product, also coming out of Berkeley in part. And so I was at a workshop a couple of years ago, and somebody said, the Human Mortality Database has launched thousands of papers, but we're at risk of falling behind. It's hard to study inequality without individual level mortality data. So people have done this, but this is the kind of thing that happens. Here's another person. We lost our access to SIP, that's Survey of Income, Program and Participation, and Social Security data when the grant expired. So they got insider access to the data, but then the grant expired, so there's no replicability. They can't even do the analysis. They can't share the analysis, anything like that. So here's a solution. So here we have a picture of then at Berkeley, Raj Chetty, and still at Berkeley, Emmanuel Saez. And so they published a kind of a blockbuster paper back about 10 years ago. And it was such a big paper that a lot of commentary on it, including this commentary in Science magazine, how two economists got access to IRS tax records. This research is about intergenerational mobility. They look at children and parents matched by Social Security numbers. And this is a fun article, and actually I noticed it was quoted in an article that you wrote, Ted. When I Googled to get a better screenshot, I got your paper. So the approach there is they actually become one of the data providers. Kind of like when you go to a census research data center, except in a more specialized way. They became kind of IRS employees, signed all the papers, went through all the security checks. Then they don't distribute any of the data. Instead, what they do is they protect privacy and publication, and they do share summary data sets, a little bit like the GWAS coefficients that we saw before. So they become one with the data provider. And you can think, what kind of issues does this raise? Well, you all have dark sides to you, but fortunately, I don't have to ask you about your dark side. We can just look on, what is the website called? Economic Job Market Rumors, is that right? EJR, okay, so that's what I did. Here are two papers that Chetty wrote, one with Saez. This is the intergenerational mobility in the United States with millions of records, the entire US tax database. And then there's a more recent paper, which is closer to what we're doing in CenSoc, the association between income and life expectancy. So what they did there is they linked all the tax records to mortality records, again, using their status as internal IRS researchers. Okay, so we can go to the Economic Job Rumors and see what people said about that nice science article, which was very laudatory. It had some criticisms of them, but was basically saying this is the new best thing. So here's the article. The first comment is whatever. That's from Danish Bro. Okay. Then we have people lauding them. And then we have one more paper in economics with far-reaching policy implications that can't be replicated because they're the only ones who have access to this data. We can't all join the IRS. And people were saying he should get the Nobel Prize, and others are saying you shouldn't get a Nobel just for having the connections. So here it's not only the kind of impossibility of getting access, but it's also his privilege of getting access, and it's not a fair playing field. Here we go. The issue is not one of lack of replication, well, I think it is, but anyway, rather writing this type of paper requires enormous amounts of resources and connections, something that only the top 1% of economics can do. And I'm sure Ted knows the story much better than I, why Raj moved from here to Stanford and from Stanford to Harvard, but he's moving to richer and richer institutions to do his research because it's a big operation. Here's another comment. What is the difference between a study based upon data one man or one team has access to versus an irreplicable study? I mean, this is replicable in theory. Someone else could physically get access to the data. Whether they could do it administratively is another question. Okay, and lastly, we get the same kind of thing. A person suggesting the Nobel for Chetty has received some goods here. I think that means likes. Is that sarcastic? Are we really rewarding the ability to get some data set that everyone wanted? It's not like he had this fantastic idea of using such data. By using connections. So again, there's two issues here. One is the replicability issue, and the other is the kind of fairness issue. And then I'm going to raise one more thing, I think, especially if I run out of time. There's the lack of kind of extensibility. So there's replicating the study to see if the result was right or not. But then there's building on the study and having it be a generative project that you can add things to, do new analyses of, and that sort of thing. And that's a huge thing. And that's something that one will be able to do if we use public data. I should say the public data also has public keys, people's names and social security numbers. So we don't actually share those, but they're available if you want. And so anybody can link and expand the data sets that we're building. Okay, so here's the public solution. So first of all, there's kind of a legal note here. There's no privacy rights for dead people in the United States. Okay, there are many laws protecting the rights of dead people, but if you go to court, you'll win because there have been repeated rulings here. Also, you read in the newspaper, cause of death not revealed, privacy. I mean, I think the law is pretty clear on this, that dead people don't have privacy rights. However, individuals' preferences about releasing data about mortality are very also clearly revealed, and those are people don't like to share the data. Okay, so Social Security by various means has released maybe 100 million, a little more records of deaths with names and Social Security numbers and some other information also. So we actually have a lot of people's deaths. I'll show you in a second how complete those records are. And then if we want to do any social science research, we would like to know something about the people who died. Well, we could have research assistants look up 100 million people online and build profiles of them and build variables. But it turns out there's another public data source in the United States, and that is the US Census, which is private for, does anybody know how long? 70 years plus 2 years of extra, 72 years. So these laws were passed a long time ago when people didn't live quite as long. But the idea is that after 70 years, what you said 70 years ago is no longer sensitive information. So it's all legal. And you can all get it. You can all go online today, already look at the 1950 census. It hasn't been transcribed fully yet and released by third parties, but it's there on the National Archives page. So the project basically takes gets things like education, address, income of parents, any variable we can get from the 1940 census, and then links it to death records. Is the kind of the first round of CenSoc 1.0. Here's the 1940 census. This is what the forms look like. These have all been transcribed. Again, ancestry. We just heard ancestry being referred to in the previous talk. I mean, this is unbelievable revolution brought about in the availability and the transcription of data and the gathering of data by these private companies. It's pretty remarkable, and it is having a big spillover to social science. So in the 1940 census, we have about 130 million people. It's a very rich census. It doesn't just have your name and age in relationship to household head. It also has wage income, education, all kinds of information about housing, some information about assets. And then you can, of course, build any variable you want, since you have a complete, at a contextual level, because you have everybody. So you can do how far away do you live from a millionaire? Or what's the racial composition of your neighborhood? Or do you live next to people who have the same ethnic origin as you? Or do you live next to your people with the same last name as you? Maybe your relatives. So you can build anything you want by any geography. So we didn't have to do this. This was already done by Ancestry, and the Minnesota Population Center actually has a program for sharing the transcribed data. The Social Security Death Index, which is the first data set we linked to, is about 80 million deaths. Anything in this region here, which is 1975 to 2005 and above age 65, is super complete. This is 95%, this is 98%, this is 99%. So we pretty much have everybody who died in the United States. And this data set has Social Security numbers, date of birth, date of death, and it's public. You can go download it right now. You can Google it and search for it and download it. Okay, so we link these two data sets, and then we have complete mortality information, and we can basically replicate this study if we want with public information, and do, of course, lots of other things too. So here's how the linkage works. You have the 1940 census. Sorry, this is crossed out. This is birth cohorts here. So you have birth cohorts, people born 1900, 1940, and you have death records later on. This is essentially complete death records. Okay, so there's some things that have to be done with this in order to analyze it in a clean way. Just because you're not matched doesn't mean you're still alive. So you need to use different mortality methods based on the distribution of ages of death of the people that you do match. You have to wait to make up for the fact that some people are more difficult to match than other people. And there's a couple of other issues too, which I'll talk about, I think. Right here. Record matching, mortality estimation. Oh, and then you might be kind of bored by this because I'm not interested in mortality. It's kind of interesting why people live a long time and why they don't. I think the way to really expand the kind of coverage of what you can do with this data is to think of how long you live as an outcome of a series of life events. So it's kind of a summary measure for all the assaults and benefits that you get over life. So even if you're not interested in what causes mortality, you might be very interested in, does such and such a policy or does such and such an exposure or does such and such an experience make your life better or worse? And to the extent that you can make the argument that that's going to be linked to longevity, you can talk about that. So you may not be interested in mortality as an outcome, but I think it's a good. It's not better than income. It's not better than happiness. But it's a good measure that captures a lot of things. Okay. So that's the nature of the project. Let me talk a little bit, and of course this is public data that you can download. The way we format it is that we don't give you the name of the person and the Social Security number. Instead, we give you the ID number so that it can be matched to the public release of the micro census data. So you just get numbers, but you could hack this. Is this being recorded and distributed? It is. Okay, then I won't explain how you, but it would be difficult to do, and we try to make it protected. But this is public data. Basically, what we're interested in protecting is not so much the privacy rights of individuals, but the institutions that shared the data with us and did the transcription work and did the work, and they don't want us just, they don't want heritage.com, which is probably owned by Ancestry, but I could start a website, heritage.com, which would then take all the work product of Ancestry.com and republish it. They don't want that kind of thing. Okay, so once you have people's names and birthplaces and Social Security numbers at ages and things like that, you can match to any other public data. So one thing we've already matched to are World War II enlistments, which have height and weight. And for some subset of people, the Army test that they took, which is kind of like a cognitive test score. Of course, we started the project with the 1940 census, and it's taking us a long time before we're done. Of course, the 1950 census just came out. So we're going to link to the 1950 census when Ancestry and Minnesota release that, I think, later this year. In the middle of our project, there was a new release because of, I'm not sure if it was FOIA inspired, but the National Archives suddenly dumped 100 million what are called pneumodent records. These are linked to this, these are like the Social Security records we got before, but they not only have the death information, they also have the application. And on people's applications, they put down their parents' names and their birthplace. So once we have their parents' names, we can suddenly match to women. I should say the initial 1940 death record matched didn't do for women because people could have changed their names since 1940. And if any women who got, most women who got married did change their names. So now we have father's name of all the women who got Social Security cards, so we actually know their maiden name. So we can match all the women because we know their marital status in 1940. And it took 4 of us a long time to figure out the very simple algorithm for matching maiden names, but we did it and it worked. So we now have women, and we can look at women and men, and also do better matches because we have birthplace. And then our latest thing that we're trying to do is there's a system for reporting dead people to banks to avoid fraud. And so when someone dies in your family, especially if it's an old person getting Social Security benefits, you need to fill out death certificate. You need to report this to Social Security. Social Security keeps a very up-to-date list of this, and then distributes it to anybody who has a license to use, permission to use the data. So Bank of America, for example, uses this, and then if you appear on the deceased list, people are applying for credit cards with that card, with that Social Security number, that name, they're not going to give it to you. And it's a very complicated, long story, and it has a difficult history of how this list, the original death registers we were using were essentially that list. But what was happening was that people who were alive, so out of the 80 million records, 20 people were actually alive. They were mistakenly on the list, and they were canceled, and their lives were ruined. And they went to Congress, and Congress said, we're not going to distribute this publicly anymore. Instead, we're going to give it to banks with a different procedure. But researchers can also get it, and so we're in the process of getting that. So why is this neat? We'll get real-time data. So during COVID, if we would have had this, we would have been able to say something like the income gradient of people dying from COVID. Of course, race was a big issue and was studied extensively, but not particularly well. But we could do, different risk factors, COVID, different things like that. So once we do this, we'll actually, the other big advantage of this is we'll be able to get much later coverage. So it won't go to 2005, it'll go to 2023 or 2024, 2025. And then we'll be able to study all the people who were children during the 1940s, 1950s. Because we only get people over age 65 who die. And so all of the New Deal policies towards children we'll be able to look at and look at those kind of outcomes. Okay, so here's just a couple of illustrations. These are very old illustrations that I grabbed from an old site. This is in my original talk on CenSoc from 2015 or something. So this is just a regression we did on age at death, showing that when you have a couple million records, you can see a lot more than you usually see. So it's well known that Japanese people born in Japan who live, immigrants from Japan who live in the United States live a very long time. And it's got to be the lack of red meat, the fish, the seafood, the habits of the Japanese. But actually, this is a general phenomenon of people who immigrate to the United States. And if you look at other groups, it turns out that Filipinos basically live just as long as Japanese and Chinese. These are all, I don't have the standard errors here, but these are all big numbers, very big, very different than being a native-born person. You can also see that beyond, say, education, income, whether you own a house is super important in the United States. So this is controlling for education, controlling for income. It's not the wealth effect. It's actually kind of the security of your life is kind of what we think of this as. Kind of it helps you live a long time. So these units are years of life, conditional on surviving to 65. So these are big effects. A year or two is a huge effect at age 65. So this is very early work, and many people have done a lot of papers on these different topics. But this is the kind of thing you can do quite easily with the data. Here's I'm not sure how many economists we have here, but there's economics of identity. Almost all the things I'm talking about are kind of Berkeley based. So this is Akerlof based. The mention I made of policy for children would be Hilary Hoynes based. So I guess I have a very limited universe, or Berkeley has a very large presence in economics, probably both. Yes. I think that
person.
Yes.
And I was trying to study healthcare. So I think hospital beds are related, like people correlate that with mortality, infant mortality rates, maternal mortality rates, emergency admissions, and why people die. There aren't very many hospital beds.
Yes.
So I think mortality records are extremely important, and that's one of the benefits because I do get that as well.
So the point is that the questioner says lots of things matter for mortality in terms of medical infrastructure, like hospital beds and things like that. She mentioned the examples of children and maternal mortality, which I think are super important. You couldn't study that with CenSoc data because we basically only have really good coverage over age 65, but you could look at elderly mortality. And to do that, you need to somehow construct your own database or get one about the availability of hospital beds. Presumably you do that by geography, and then you link to the geography in CenSoc. Yes.
Quick question: does the data also have marital status and like when they got married?
It has anything in the okay, the question was, what about another variable, marital status of when they got married? So the basic answer to all these questions is anything that's in the 1940 census or 1930 census or 1920 census you can use. So in the 1950 census, and anything you can link to geography or to an individual based on name or social security number you can use. So I think the answer to your question is probably not, you probably can't get what you want because you probably want marital status of people when they're 50 or 60. My guess is if you're studying mortality of people older, but you can look at whether you're married in 1940, certainly as a start, and then you could potentially, link to HRS or something like that, but you'd have to get internal permission from them. You'd have to work with them to have people's social security numbers, so it wouldn't be super hard, but you'd have to get individual identifiers from HRS, Health and Retirement Survey. Okay, so here's an interesting kind of topic. Does having a distinctively Black name hurt your life chances? Okay, so not actually something economists traditionally would study, but Freakonomics and building on Akalov's work has a nice paper. So this is Roland Fryer and Stephen Levitt, old paper. They basically find no effect of Black names. They use California birth records, which they got again through an arrangement. They didn't have to become a sworn employee of the state of California, but I don't have the California birth records, for example. I'd have to go through a procedure to get them. And then they basically found no effect. Their outcome variable was the zip code of a mom, where she lived in, whether she lived in a kind of better or worse zip code by whatever they were measuring zip code by. So this was not super easily replicable. You have to get permission from California. As far as I know, no one's replicated it. There's an opposite paper by Lisa Cook, still head of the council? No. Okay, and now at the Fed. Oh, okay. Berkeley graduate Trevon Logan, and I'm not sure who John Parman is, but they did historical data. They got a lot of death certificates from 4 or 5 states, and then they found people with distinctively Black names actually were dying at older ages. Unfortunately, you can't. It's data they've never shared. It's not replicable. Okay, so we have CenSoc. We thought we'd try this too. Well, one of these we can do a CenSoc because we have parents' names. We can construct siblings. So we thought, well, we should really look within families because people who get the names are different. Distinctively Black names are different for many reasons besides they're carrying a name than people who get less distinctive names. So we look at siblings. And we find a pretty big effect of comparing, say, a brother named Moses to a brother named John. Moses is a very distinctively Black name for the time. These are not, I'm kind of mixing apples and oranges here because the Fryer and Levitt study was looking at a little more at unusual names, whereas we're talking about kind of names that are disproportionately held by one group or another. And strangely, well, and so how do we reconcile that with the Cook finding? Well, it turns out that the families that gave these distinctively Black names actually had higher longevity on average. So the kind of between family effect, the families that give Black names are longer living, but within families, there's a big negative effect. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that you can do with this data. You have huge samples. We have, tens and tens of thousands of Black siblings, Black brothers. And you can kind of tease out the literature. And this is replicable, and it's also extensible. Am I getting a time signal or a question?
I don't know what looking at this question different as well. I know one is I've been applying to California state job with this for a second block, but then changed it to all split.
Yes.
So that's just one case that I know. I'm just curious if there's a or conversation.
Yeah. Okay, great question. The question is, well, there's also another type of research that's done where you do an audit study where you send someone, the same person in with two different names. And that shows big effects. Or even better, the resume studies where you don't even see the person. I mean, we're getting a little a side tangent here, but here we're looking, when we're looking at observational studies, we're looking at the effect of the name for people whose racial identity is by and large known. So this is like the effect of the name. I mean, in our CenSoc data, we're looking at people born in 1920. They're living their whole life. Now, there are going to be times when only their name is revealed, but most of the time, they're going to be known by their landlord what race they are. They're going to be known by their job interviewer what race they are. They're going to be known by the doctor what race they are. So this is just the additional effect of the name. It's not the effect of being Black, which it might be, which you might think that you're getting at if you change names on a resume, for example. So that's a very interesting question, and I should say this paper is in progress, so I would love to share it with you, but we're not done. Okay. But the point here is that there are contentious areas where replicable data is I think replicable research is needed. Okay, and then of course, you have this big data set with complete coverage in the United States. You can study anything you want, whether it's pollution, wildfires, environmental disasters, policy rollouts, like I was talking before, like benefits given to children during the New Deal, old age insurance, Social Security gap. The whole team at Wisconsin that's teamed up with us that's doing what they're doing is two things really. They're replicating lots of studies found because it's easy to do such a study with CenSoc data. You don't have to gather the data, so you can, in a few weeks, you can replicate a study that took somebody a year or two to gather all the data for. So they're finding a lot of kind of confirming a lot of effects found in the literature mostly, and then they're also doing new things. Okay, so I'm wrapping up here. The US has remarkable public data. Usually Scandinavia is thought of as like the queen, the empress of administrative data, but Scandinavia is small. Even if you have the complete population, you don't have many people in a given birth cohort. The US is thought to be the wasteland, has historically been thought to be the wasteland of administrative data, but we're a huge country, and we have laws that are very favorable in terms of the data is owned by the people, unless otherwise proven. Much of this is still untapped. When you work with public data, you of course have replicability, and I think an even bigger advantage is that you can add to the data because you have the keys. So I guess my advice to the young people in this room is I know the current trend, and I wasn't sure if I'd be speaking to economists or not, but I know the current trend in economics is go get a data set no one has, and that'll be your ticket to fame. I don't know. I think it's not a terrible strategy to use that time thinking and being creative. Use public data as much as you can. Maybe you still have to just show that you're tough by going out and gathering data, but you can leave gathering data to other people like the Minnesota Population Center or the CenSoc project, and you can just use the data. Or, there's kind of an in-between too, which is use this huge public data set where you can get the keys for, and then attach your own little, small work. So when I was young, I gathered zero data. I only did secondary analysis with data sets that have been analyzed thousands of times, and I did something different with the data. I think that's in some ways a very good strategy for people who are thinking about how to move ahead. And you can use data that other people are gathering. And probably the same thing would apply to the earlier talk. You don't have to do GWAS. You have to figure out a creative way to use the GWAS scores. And the examples that Dan showed were not obvious to me. For example, that you control for one thing in order to see the effect of the other. With his education and cognition, I think, education Alzheimer's example. So that kind of thing takes years to kind of think through. And if you can get going on that, you'll have a great head start. So build on the replicability and transparency revolution by having to gather less data and instead doing more analysis.